This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 15th of August, 2019, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed it, this is Winning Headlines. Let's take a look at today's headlines.
Yes.
Daily Nation, top Kenyans to face US trial over Akasha drugs. The Standard, WAIGURU Mount Kenya is ready for Raila. And The Star, uproar as big tribes dominate NHIF, NSSF jobs. Let's start with these big tribes that are dominating jobs.
I want to know where this story came from.
It has
where
no
it
legs.
originated from. Yeah, it seems to have come out of nowhere. Because, what they're discussing is the fact that Section 7.2 of the NCI Act 2008 provides that no public establishment shall have more than 1/3 of its staff from the same ethnic community. And so they cite NHIF, NSSF, KRA, a number of other institutions as examples where some tribes are dominating.
And they also note that in parastatals, Kalenjins form a part of the big three tribes taking the most offices. We note that.
Yeah, so this report or this inquiry has been done by the MPs, and I want to ask them, can they go read a book? Because these numbers simply do not add up. Let's take the NHIF, for example. They say that they have a total workforce of 1,927 employees. So we take 30% of that, that is 578.1 individuals. But then they go on to say that the Kalenjins have the most with 393 employees, followed by the Kikuyus with 373, and then third are the Kambas with 241. Excuse me, but if I do simple math, that simply doesn't add up.
But I still have to remind you, as I told you earlier, that these are 900 jobs that are gone, leaving the 38 of us, remember 42 tribes, to square it out for the remainder.
But even if the numbers add up, there's a concept in Latin known as libido dominandi. That is the will, the urge to dominate, right? And this is a fact of life. You know, when you have communities such as the GEMA nation, which are the most populous in the country, it also follows that they should be proportionally represented in the public sector. Right?
And I think another question we should ask is, are we undermining quality in the face of really trying to enforce affirmative action?
Well, it's a good question. Meritocracy versus affirmative action. So if you have like 5 Kikuyus who are well qualified for the job, and this one, I wouldn't even name the tribe, I'll say a different tribe. You pick that person because you're trying to meet those quotas. I'm just asking.
I know, it doesn't add up for me, and I think the issue I take here is the fact that the math doesn't add up. I think that they're trying to fuel anger and trying to make people angry that there are certain tribes who are occupying these offices. It doesn't.
So there's a scheme going on.
There's a scheme.
Then we ask ourselves the 3 questions that we always ask ourselves to look at these headlines for you. We ask ourselves, is this headline topical or is it speculative? Is it repetitive or is it groundbreaking? And finally, is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
None of the above. We just toss it. This is useless.
Swooping up emotion.
All right.
In another form of libido dominandi of the dynasties, WAIGURU Mount Kenya is ready for Raila. This, I think it's an article following her interview yesterday. So I guess it's a good way for them to cross-pollinate and sell each other's products.
That's a great idea.
And you can't blame them for that. But I have a question. Who gave WAIGURU the authority to speak on behalf of GEMA?
Right? I don't think she has any authority whatsoever.
No. But there's something in politics called the law of first occupant, right? If she tells us that she sent feelers yesterday and basically told us that she could be in the lineup for
she's presenting herself
in the lineup for
2022, but not for the top position.
Not for the top position.
I
but
want
she
a
could
DP
be an
soft
able
landing.
deputy. And I think that's a good move politically. She's earned her stripes also in cabinet, as well as now as governor, and also she has the benefit of having been endorsed by Uhuru Kenyatta and the Kenyatta family.
Yeah, we said that her wedding was a coronation of sorts. But I still want to ask the question. We are halfway through 2019. 2022 is about 1,000 and something days away. Is she exposing herself too early?
No, I don't agree.
And moreover, exposing herself and then endorsing Raila. is that a person that she can trust? And then therefore, is she underestimating Ruto?
Okay, she may be underestimating Ruto, but I have to say this. If her wedding was a coronation, remember who was present? The president was present.
Exactly.
And I have to go back in time. Let's pull out something from the history books.
Yeah.
A time when WAIGURU was under attack. And she was under attack from same Raila that she's named here.
Yes.
And one of the first people that called out for her to be supported was Mama Ngina.
Yeah.
So remember that fact. And another curious fact is, I think it was yesterday, didn't Raila have a meeting with
Christina Pratt?
Christina Pratt.
That's right.
So that's a curious meeting. So if you see all of these things aligning, I think even as
The dynasties
GEMA,
are up
the
to something.
dynasties are
They
up to
are.
something.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. What do you say about this headline?
I think it's a great headline.
Yeah.
We put it in the parking bay.
Put it in the parking bay,
Yes.
absolutely.
Finally, top Kenyans to face U.S. trial over Akasha drugs. This story keeps coming back.
All
It
I will
does.
say is take them. Take them happily. I think that my biggest gripe with this situation is the fact that if the US does not take them, we assume that there will be justice and law found in Kenya. But I don't think that is the case. So if the Americans can take these nuisances off our hands and deal with them, do it.
And we don't even care what happens.
I think whether they are taken or not, the lawyers, the judges, the DCI officers, the civil servants that are mentioned here, although not in name, it all depends on the political state of play. It depends on whether political objectives will be met. So maybe this could be a case of the revisitation that was discussed.
So if we're revisiting and we have the good political will for the Americans to take them, then they're all going shipped out. But if there's no political will,
if it's not
and I think if the president is serious about fighting graft, he should, as you say, extradite them.
Yeah. But then again, if he is serious, we should find a way to convict them at home, if we have the ability to do so, which I don't believe in.
I don't think
I
so.
say we toss it.
Yes,
Toss
I
it?
agree.
Okay.
My interesting headline today, and I don't know why, is WAIGURU's
Yeah,
the standard.
I think this is
this is
I
a
think
winning
that's our
headline.
winning headline. Absolutely.
And
He deserves to win.
we have a winning headline from the Standard. On to our next segment, the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is a cartoon humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy? Let's start with our winning headline.
Honestly,
Paper.
Gado, as much as we like a little bit of an international story here and there, this is getting too much, this is getting tired.
Too much.
And unfortunately, this isn't even an interesting story.
It's not.
No, it
Yeah,
isn't.
Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, I promise that you'll be in front of the queue, didn't I?
And he's in his pocket.
I think
say
we toss that
it
immediately.
Without
without even thinking.
No.
Onto more interesting things. Victor Ndula has a cartoon here for us, a caricature. There's no caricature. It's a drawing of Punguza Mzigo Bill, who's a donkey on his dying legs.
Yes.
Really
On twos.
looking very depressed. And up on a tree is BBI,
The vulture.
The vulture, looking extremely hungry, salivating, in fact, as it awaits.
One is salivating, the other one is dying of thirst. And I think
I don't
it's
know.
too early to call the verdict. I think it's too early to say whether Punguza Mzigo is on its deathbed.
Yeah, and I think that in light of the recent news, I think that Ndula has completely missed the point.
Yeah.
I mean, we just found out that the court has cleared the 47 counties to debate the bill,
to discuss
which
the bill.
means that it has legs. It is going somewhere. It's not on its dying twos, as you said. So I think he needs to reevaluate.
In fact, in coming months, there could very well be a reversal.
Yes.
Punguza Mzigo could be the vulture, and BBI could be the donkey.
donkey that's
Yeah.
dying.
We'll see.
I don't know, it's premature, and maybe it could be Ndula's presupposition of this is what he feels about how BBI is and what it's doing to us. Finally, the Star. Let's see what Ozone has.
The latest watermelon.
Oh my goodness.
In the political arena. This is Eden Duale, who has recently been saying that he supports a parliamentary system.
But on the other hand,
So it's a caricature of him with really exaggerated ears. What do you call this?
Muscio Pepe.
Muscio Pepe, right?
Doesn't this remind you of 2M?
2M, I wish you were here to defend yourself. Oh dear.
And so he's biting the watermelon,
Which is called the Ruto presidency
called the
parliamentary
presidency.
system.
Absolutely, and he says here being dual E.
Duale.
Duali.
Yeah, this is in reference to Duale flip-flopping between does he want the
flip-flopping.
parliamentary system, is he for Ruto? I think we toss it.
I think we toss
that
it.
Pun
But
is
it is
terrible.
funny
And that pun is really terrible.
so bad.
So
You know,
bad.
it can have a dad joke sometimes that's so bad.
This is actually a dad joke.
It's
Dad
a
joke.
dad joke. But it's so
Terrible.
bad, it's good.
No, thank
Terrible,
you.
terrible, terrible.
Do we have a winning cartoon?
I think by default, you guys have edged out the competition. Oh my, did you just?
Sorry.
We have no winning cartoon. What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. Today is inspired by a book entitled Gomorrah by Roberto Saviano, written in 2006, and is a continuation of this week's theme on gangs, mafia, and gangsters. Yes. So this book is an expose on the organized crime network, which is called the Camorra. And this book is a brutal indictment on Italy's ruling class, businesses and officials who were out to protect their own interests while sacrificing the common good, leaving the south of Italy and its people crippled by organized crime. So the Camorra are an Italian crime syndicate that arose from the Campania region in the south of Italy. And they're one of the oldest known criminal organizations in Italy, dating back to the 17th century. So its origins are not entirely clear, but what I've been able to gather is that it first emerged out of a power vacuum between 1799 and 1815, when the territory in Naples, in this Campania region, declared itself a republic and exiled their king, and subsequently received support from the recently liberated France after the French Revolution. So, thanks to the Camorra, this crime syndicate, Campania has one of the highest murder rates in Europe, one of the highest ratios of drug dealers to inhabitants, soaring levels of unemployment, and very high rates of drug addiction. But at its strongest, it grew into a parallel world between the state and itself. And it became an alternative to the Italian government. And they like to be called the system rather than the Camorra.
In fact, they say Camorra is a non-existent word. It's what's used by judges and narcotics officials when trying to define who they are.
They call themselves the system because they are the system. The Camorra offers the people work, they lend them money, they protect them from the government, and they even suppress street crime. But the problem is that often the Camorra tears itself apart and then comes together again. And in those moments of instability, the people have to hide away while they wait for that to happen. And so I think when we talk about that, we have to understand the origins of mafia, right?
Yes.
So the mafia as we know it coming from Sicily, the Sicilian mafia, and that is where the term mafia originated from. So the Camorra is not an organized organization, and they cannot be disciplined and they cannot be identified. They operate with a flat structure, so they are horizontal. And the problem with this is that you end up having a lot of people competing with each other. So they form, they split, they descend, they reascend, and they have vicious feuds. And in this time, you have a lot of violence. So they say that the average age for a person in the Camorra gang is 40 years old. Average age.
It's actually your lifespan. It's your lifespan. It's how long you live.
How long you live. Sorry, average lifespan.
Yeah.
And you contrast this with the Sicilian mafia, which has a single rule book and a single structure. They have an honor code amongst them. So they have a pyramid where you have the soldiers at the bottom and it apexes to the bosses at the top. And every group is known as a family. So each family has their own territory. So you have this issue in Naples where they are governed by something that we call realpolitik. And this is a system of politics or principles based on practical rules rather than on moral or ideological considerations.
I have to cut in there and bring in something that we always say here at this table and generally at the Fifth Estate, and that's hustlers versus dynasties. Because I get a sense in which the Sicilian mafia is very dynastic. It has barriers to entry, a hierarchy, a mode in which finances are spread down, foot soldiers, and an apex leadership that is controlled and familial, if I could call it that. But on this other hand, you have the Camorra gangs, which are amorphous, which you want to get a seat at the table, then you work your way out in the street, meet as much violence, get as much business interests, then you get your seat at the table, which feels very hustler-like to me.
Which perhaps explains why they're one of the most successful mafia entities in the world.
Because they've been able to spread themselves.
They've really been able to scale up, spread themselves across the world. I think they've got over a dozen different countries in which they operate.
You were calling it franchising of a sort.
Absolutely. It's a sort of franchising, right? And because they're not so stuck up about this hierarchy and these different rigid forms that they must subscribe to, they've been able to spread out their tentacles across the world.
Across the world, it's true.
And today they're very successful. They control
a lot of industries like construction, high fashion, illicit drugs, and toxic waste disposal. For me, the thing that stuck to me is not the violence. It's not another thing, the thing that stuck with me is not violence. What stuck with me is that they control Naples. Now, there's something all of us need to know about Naples.
Yes.
Do you use anything from China? If your answer to this is yes, as it is around the world, then you have interacted with the Camorra gangs.
Precisely.
Because the port of Naples is the one singular port in which all goods from China must transit.
They said 70% of everything made in China passes through the port of Naples.
And now 70% is what is the registered goods, the things that are declared, the things that we know, the things that tax is paid for. Now, contraband also passes through Naples. And all of these things is not recorded.
And we have a lot of contraband in Kenya.
A lot of it. So
the headlines are
you have passed through the Camorra gang. You are financing a crime network that is as wide as possible and reaches you.
They are ruthlessly efficient, and that's largely because of their violence. And maybe you guys might think that violence is necessary, but I must really speak against the violence, right?
Covenants without swords are but mere words. I have to say that.
But let me tell you, I mean, the violence in this book is shocking, right? It's actually really also upsetting.
The way in which they deal with people,
absolutely. And in my view, there are barely any redeeming qualities in this book. Right? So I'm going to talk just a little bit about something that somebody tried to do to introduce a new world order for this region. For this region. His name was Father Giuseppe Diana of Naples. And in fact, the title of the book is inspired by his work. Giuseppe in the 1980s wrote a publication in which he said the time has come to stop being Gomorrah. And that's the reason why he was killed eventually in 1994. But in the 1980s, being somebody who had lived amongst them and somebody who had witnessed the scale of violence and the corruption of society in Naples as a result of this mafia, he decided to set up he set up a welcome center for African immigrants to stop them from being recruited by the Camorra. And so what he was trying to do is to set up, this clean, a new system in which young people could thrive, in which they could make an honest living.
So they don't get pulled into...
Precisely, right? And that's, I think, what we need. So maybe we need to send some missionaries from Africa
to Italy.
I
will say this.
But missionaries who are of some earthly good. The problem with Christians sometimes is that we're so heavenly bound. We're of no earthly good. So we need to send some missionaries with practical solutions on how for Italians on how to solve their problems.
To this really Catholic place where they think that they actually believe in God.
But as much as you say that the book has no redeeming qualities, I think it tells us something very interesting about how the bandit economy works, how illicit markets work. Because in the book, the author says that in Naples, the native language is power and the rule of law is foreign. And he says that in Camorra, the state and Camorra feed off each other. And he says, and I'll quote, the system's economic group, the system being the Camorra, the Camorra's economic group is not born out of direct criminal activity, but of the ability to balance illicit and licit capital. And he says that since these clans form Campania's primary economic force, for local politicians, refusing a relationship with the Camorra would be like the deputy mayor of Turin refusing to meet with the top management of Fiat.
Which would be like our Sonko refusing to meet with Matatu Owners Association.
Exactly.
Otherwise known as some group.
So politicians are beholden.
They are beholden to this gang. They have no choice but to integrate and to operate with them. So is one feeding into the other? Is the other feeding into... I
have to agree that the one thing that has to stick out about these guys, yes, they are premised on violence, and yes, that is one arm of what they do. The other arm is a very strong economic one. And that bandit economy, I feel, and that's the thing that I told you stuck with me, spreads out to each and every one of us in the whole world. We interact with their links with China. We interact with all of the things that they do. We interact with their construction without knowing it. We interact with their illicit drugs, because what they do is that they use that network that they have where they sell actual goods, because they give a story. Like, he gives a story. This guy who wrote the book was a journalist and was very young, about 24 when he wrote the book. And after he wrote the book, he got police protection, because he has permanent police protection.
For exposing their secrets.
Yes, because what he did is that he did it's a part autobiography, part expose. So he joined, through the book, he works through 3 institutions. One, he's in a Chinese textile manufacturing company, So he sees how the Camorra interacts with the China from the inside perspective. The other was a construction site, and the other he worked as a waiter in a Camorra wedding. So he wanted to see how the institution works. And he gives an example of how designers, for instance, get their goods made. So he says that what they do is that they hold silent auctions or private auctions. So you come, if you are a manufacturer, and what they do is that they give you the goods. All of them, they give everyone the fabric, and they tell them, we want 8,000 pieces. Then an auction is had where the person who has the highest quality, the lowest time, at the lowest price gets the contract. If you get that contract, everyone is working on these things. So only one person gets paid, whoever finishes on time.
But you have a bunch of people left behind
with
who were not paid.
But who have the same goods at the same standard and have a ready market. So sometimes these goods feed out back into Europe using the Camorra network. And that's what they do. Since they control everyone, they take them and sell them as knockoffs. And the designer companies were okay with this. Until the government cracked down on the Camorra, they would never raise a question about it.
So I think what this story tells us is how, if we compare it with Pablo Escobar, and even with what we did yesterday, you're seeing how there are these people who are finding a vacuum in the state, a position where the state is not occupying space, and they're saying we will take it up for you, and they become of benefit to the people,
the community.
So I think it's quite interesting. And unlike the other two mafia groups that we looked at, the Camorra is still alive and well. They are yet to have their tipping point where we find their demise happening. But
after over 100 years, I highly doubt that's going to happen.
Exactly. I know, right?
This is Winning Headlines. Today we had a winning headline from The Standard and no winning cartoon. Have a great day and see you tomorrow.